Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker and we begin today's video with a headline. NBA teams are terrified of Warriors 2020 draft pick, Tom Haberstroh says. And this is weird because this is a Warriors team that as of this recording has the worst record in the Western Conference, so why would teams be afraid of them? Well, of course you guys already know the answer to that, it's the draft pick part of this. Obviously the team that's playing so poorly right now isn't the team that the Warriors would like to have on the floor. Guys like Glenn Robinson, Eric Paschall, and Alec Burks were not supposed to be playing big minutes for this team, but due to all of their injuries with Klay and Steph and Draymond and D'Lo, this is where they are, essentially in, as it's termed in the Yahoo Sports article, a gap year. And so as a result, this could be one of the most historically relevant, awful NBA teams in recent history. Not ever, as I'll get to later, but still in a couple of years, we could look back on this 2019-20 Golden State Warriors team and see it as the point in which they actually relaunched their dynasty, just with a different cast of characters. And that is of course because the NBA awards its worst teams with the best asset it has to offer without actually having a top 5 player in the league the chance at a high draft pick, because it's irrelevant how good a team actually is when healthy, just what their record is in terms of their lottery chances. So in a weird way, when you combine the incredible amount of injured talent that the Warriors have, their poor record, and the value of a top 3 pick in a given NBA draft, this is actually quite an enviable position for them to be in right now. And you could also argue that this is actually the best case scenario for their season. And so they actually have a couple of different paths that they can take. One, they can actually select a player with that high draft pick, and given their development history, I feel pretty confident in saying that that player would end up being pretty good and potentially a future all-star for them, depending on where they pick in the draft. And then you put that player alongside Curry and Klay and D'Lo and Draymond. And that has the added benefit of not only improving their chances next season, but also if the player develops properly, further extending their dynasty moving forward and improving their chances of actually being a really good team past this whole Curry, Klay, Draymond era. Or they could use the pick as trade bait to bring in an all-star caliber player right away to improve their chances of winning a championship within the next few seasons without having to wait for that rookie to develop while Curry and Klay and Draymond and D'Lo are all still in their primes. Now the problem with that is there doesn't appear to be a really long list of stars or superstars they would want to be on the move within this next offseason, because we just saw a ton of those types of guys change teams last offseason, and it's unlikely that many, if any of them, are going to want to move again, and the success of teams like the Timberwolves and Suns to begin this season has kind of toned down their rumor mill on the possibility of players like Devin Booker and Karl Anthony Towns wanting out of their current situations. Now, as we all know, things in the NBA can change practically overnight in terms of an all-star's desire to stay with their current team, and I would imagine that the Warriors would prefer to trade this pick away for an all-star right now, while Steph and Klay and Draymond and D'Lo to a certain extent are all still in the prime to late primes of their careers, but again, it just doesn't seem all that likely. So having said that, it seems unlikely that they'll go with option number 2, which means they'll probably go into the 2020-21 season with a lineup of Curry, Klay, D'Lo, Green, and insert top 3 pick here. And it could be someone like James Wiseman or whoever else you want to put, because the top prospects in the 2020 draft at this point haven't really emerged yet. And it seems kind of crazy that all of that could happen, right? You have a team that's so talented, that's been good for the last couple of seasons, and then they have this one awful year and they get a high draft pick, and that completely changes their fortunes for the following season as well as for the next couple while that player develops. But it's not without historical precedent within the last 20 or so years in the NBA. And of course, I'm talking about the San Antonio Spurs 1996-97 NBA season. They were coming off of 3 straight 55-plus win seasons. They were 2 years removed from winning 62 games and making the Western Conference Finals. They had the 1995 MVP on their roster in David Robinson, and looked like they would continue to be a force in the Western Conference that year as well. But basically nothing went to plan that season. Robinson played in just 6 games due to injury. The team got off to a 3-15 start, to which then general manager Greg Popovich responded by telling the team that he had fired head coach Bob Hill while they were on a bus on the way to practice, and that Popovich himself would be taking over as coach. They finished with a 20-62 record, which was third worst in the league, but ended up with the first overall pick in the 97 draft due to some lottery luck, and selected two-time MVP and 15-time All-Star Tim Duncan, who would go on to win 5 championships with the Spurs, his first coming in just his second season with the team. So this was a team with a history of success that had some bad injury luck, which resulted in a lost season. They got a top pick, selected a generational talent, added him to an already talented roster when healthy, and the entire history of their franchise changed as a result. Sounds pretty similar to the situation the Warriors find themselves in now, right? If the Warriors do manage to get an all-star caliber player either with their draft pick or via trade, they're going to go right back to being one of the contenders in the Western Conference and throughout the entire league for the next couple of seasons. They have championship-proven stars, they're getting some of their other younger guys some really important developmental minutes in what is going to be a lost season for them, and they have trades to make with or without the pick being involved. Which begs the question, is this going to be a strategy that some other NBA teams try to employ in the future in a league that is increasingly going towards this tank or contend model? Now, obviously, this takes a ton of different things to come together to actually do correctly and without punishment from the league itself, but just think about how many teams would have benefited from this over the last couple of seasons. Just imagine a scenario for a second in which some of the top players for both Philadelphia and Houston had some injury issues last year, and they just decided to take the year off, and they ended up with a top pick, and they got Zion Williamson or John Morant, or they ended up trading those picks for another all-star, and then they came back the next year fresh and healthy and ready to go with this new young talent. Think about how much better their teams would be this season compared to what they have now, which are in general teams that are pretty top heavy but don't have a ton of depth. Even younger teams like the Suns or the Timberwolves, who seem like they're one really good star away from actually being a difference maker in their conference, they could potentially have benefited from this as well if they'd had a lost season and gotten a top draft pick and gone with this similar kind of model as well. Now, of course, as I said, there are issues. So many different things have to come together in order for this to work. You have to get the draft pick right. You have to get it in a draft in which there's actually some really good players to be had, because there's not always those types of players in every single draft. And you have to actually get the top pick, which is more difficult now with the different lottery odds that are supposed to keep teams away from tanking. So you could end up with bad lottery luck and not get nearly as high a pick as you would have hoped for, or it could just be a bad draft class, which could be the case for the Warriors this season, and you might have just wasted a prime of your players' careers by resting them rather than going for it in that season, and you can never really take a good year from a player for granted, as the Warriors are showing right now. So no, I don't expect this to be a strategy adopted by other teams. The Spurs Duncan thing and this whole Warriors situation right now are pretty much just flukes that have played out in the best possible way, in a kind of roundabout way. But this gap year situation that the Warriors now find themselves in is really fascinating, and I think teams are right to be very scared of what this team could look like next season. Because for a lot of fans, this past offseason was supposed to be about the downfall of the Warriors and having some other teams actually be able to compete for championships. Obviously, the Raptors won it last year, but the Warriors had some injuries in the finals. They still get all the credit in the world for winning that championship. But with Kevin Durant leaving, this was now supposed to be a new era in the NBA where there's so many more contenders. What happens if we start next season and the Warriors have the best starting unit in the entire league because of this gap year? And personally, I'm kind of torn between being really excited about seeing what this would look like, because I loved the Warriors before KD got there in terms of their play style, and having another really good player would only add to that, but also being concerned about this just being another dynastic run for the Warriors where they end up winning 3 of the next 5 championships or something with this new really good rookie. So it's an interesting situation that they find themselves in. It's not something that you see very often, but it's really interesting to look back on that historical precedent and compare them to the 96-97 Spurs. And if they do end up with a player that's even 80% of what Tim Duncan was, this team is going to be a problem, not just in this current era while Curry and Klay are there, but moving forward as well with D'Angelo Russell and whoever this top pick ends up being. It's by no means guaranteed. There's plenty of things that could still go wrong. And again, I don't expect this to be a thing every single year moving forward. But still, for now at least, this is one of the most interesting situations and stories of the season so far to me. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.